Step into the shadows where whispered tales linger. In this playlist, we uncover urban legends, stories born in back alleys, abandoned roads, and the corners of your mind. Some say they're just myths, others aren't so sure. Listen if you dare.
I have never spoken of what happened on that farm, not fully. People know the name. They whisper about the Bell family and the strange events in that Tennessee hollow, but they don't know the smell of rot that never left the walls or the sound of a woman's laughter scraping against your bones. They didn't feel the weight of something unseen sitting on their chest in the middle of the night, hot breath brushing their ear, whispering things you can't forget. I went there because I thought I didn't believe in anything. Ghosts, spirits, demons, stories to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. When I heard about the Bell Witch, I treated it like a joke, a curiosity. I thought I could sleep in the same rooms, walk the same floorboards, and prove to myself and everyone else that it was just old country superstition. The first thing that struck me when I arrived was the quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that presses in on you until you realize there are no birds, no rustling in the underbrush, nothing except the faint sigh of wind through skeletal trees. The farmhouse leaned slightly to one side, as if trying to look away from the road. The wood was gray and splintered, shingles curled like fingernails. I stepped inside and the smell hit me. Stale dust, damp earth, and something sharp, coppery like blood dried long ago. The air was heavy, warm in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. The floor groaned under my boots and each sound seemed too loud, echoing in a place that shouldn't have had room for echoes. I set my bag down in the front room. My hand brushed against the wall, and I felt something gritty under my fingertips. When I pulled back, my skin was streaked with dark brown. At first I thought it was just dirt, but the color was wrong. Too deep, too old. I rubbed it on my jeans, but the stain stayed, sinking into my skin. The sun was dipping low, spilling long shadows through the warped window glass. I went upstairs, my flashlight sweeping over the peeling wallpaper and the deep scratches carved into the banister. They weren't random, too evenly spaced like fingernails dragged in a fit of rage. In one of the rooms, the bed frame was splintered as though something had slammed into it again and again. The mattress was gone, leaving only wooden slats and a nest of what looked like mouse droppings. But when I crouched to look closer, I saw they weren't droppings at all. They were teeth. Small, yellowed, some cracked in half. I stood up too quickly and hit my head on the low ceiling. My flashlight flickered, though the batteries were fresh. I swore under my breath, but the sound seemed swallowed by the air, as if the room was listening. Night came fast. I lit a lantern I'd brought and tried to read by its glow, but the shadows shifted strangely on the walls. The wood creaked in patterns, like footsteps pacing the hallway outside my door. At first I told myself it was just the old house settling, but the steps would pause, then start again, always stopping just on the other side of the door. I tried to sleep, but the air grew hotter until sweat slid down my temples. My body felt pinned to the mattress. I opened my eyes and she was there, though I didn't see her with my eyes, not exactly. It was more like my mind filled in the shape before me. A woman tall and thin, skin so pale it seemed stretched too tight over bone. Her mouth was open far too wide, lips cracked and bleeding at the corners, and I could hear the wet sound of her breathing. Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It came from everywhere at once, curling through the boards, the walls, inside my skull. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They told me I could have you." My chest tightened, a crushing weight pressing down. I tried to move, but my arms felt nailed to the bed. Her face leaned close until I could smell her breath, sweet like rotting fruit, thick enough to taste. Something cold slid over my ankle. It felt like a hand, but the fingers were too long, curling twice around before squeezing hard. My skin burned where it touched me. I kicked and twisted, the sound of my own heartbeat roaring in my ears. Then it stopped. The weight lifted. The room was empty. I sat up gasping, my shirt clinging to my back with sweat. The lantern had gone out, though the wick was untouched. In the faint light from the window, I saw the shape of my bare foot. Around the ankle, just above the bone, was a dark ring, bruised deep purple and red. From the hallway came a low chuckle, high-pitched at first, then dropping into a guttural growl. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat in the corner, knees pulled to my chest, eyes fixed on the door. Every so often it would rattle in its frame, but it never opened. By morning, the bruising had spread halfway up my calf. My skin felt fever-hot to the touch. I thought about leaving, about walking back to my car and never coming near this place again. But there was something else. A pull, almost like a hook behind my ribs. She didn't want me gone. And some part of me didn't want to leave. When I went downstairs, I found the kitchen door open. I knew I had locked it. The wind outside had died, yet the curtains in the doorway fluttered, moving as though someone had just stepped through. On the table was something I hadn't left there, a folded scrap of paper, edges brown and brittle. I opened it carefully, afraid it might crumble in my hands. Inside, scrawled in a shaky hand, were only 3 words. I told you. Beneath the note was a single human tooth still streaked with something dark. I felt watched, but not from inside the house. The sense came from the fields beyond the back porch, from the line of trees where the light didn't reach. The shadows there seemed thicker, and they moved, even though nothing else in the world did. I told myself I would just take a quick look, that I wouldn't go far. But my feet carried me across the yard, through the brittle grass, toward that wall of trees. The closer I got, the colder the air became. My breath started to show in pale clouds. There was a faint sound, almost like whispering, not from one voice but from many, overlapping as if they were all speaking different things at the same time. The words were too faint to understand, but the tone was pleading, desperate. Then I saw her again, just inside the trees. She stood motionless, her head tilted slightly, that too wide smile splitting her face. Her eyes were black, not from shadow but from something inside, as though light couldn't exist there. She raised one hand, beckoning. Her fingers were slick, dripping something thick onto the leaves below. The ground seemed to soak it up hungrily. Should have run. I should have turned and never looked back, but instead I stepped forward into the darkness. The darkness under those trees felt different, thicker than night should be. The air clung to my skin, damp and cold, yet I could still smell that faint sweetness of decay. My boot sank slightly into the earth, and when I looked down I realized it wasn't just dirt. It was soft, like something had been buried there and was slowly rotting. The woman, if I can still call her that, stood only a few feet away now. Her hair was long and tangled, strands hanging over her face, but not enough to hide her grin. In her outstretched hand was something small. It swung gently, catching what little light filtered through the branches. It was the tooth from the kitchen table. Only now it was threaded on a piece of blackened twine, like a charm or a warning. I didn't take it, but she pressed closer, the chain brushing my chest. Her hand grazed my shirt, and the cold burned right through the fabric. Every instinct screamed at me to back away, but my body wouldn't obey. I just stared into those black eyes until the whispering grew louder. It was then I realized the voices weren't in the air around us. They were coming from inside her. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all speaking through that one body. Some sounded like children, others like grown men, but all of them carried the same strain of panic. "Get out," one voice hissed. "She won't let go," another whimpered. "She's still hungry," came a deeper, rattling tone. My knees buckled and I stumbled back. She tilted her head further and her smile twitched, stretching impossibly wider until the corners of her mouth tore. A thin trickle of dark fluid slid down her chin and fell onto the leaves. When it hit the ground, the earth shivered. I turned and ran. I don't remember deciding to do it. One second I was frozen, the next I was sprinting toward the house. The cold followed me, wrapping around my neck like hands. My legs ached, but the yard didn't seem to end. Every step felt like I was sinking deeper into the grass, the house never quite getting closer. Then something yanked hard at my ankle. I hit the ground so hard my teeth clacked together. I rolled over expecting to see her there, but instead there was just the grass. Still, something held me, cold, bony fingers clutching tight around my bruised leg. I kicked and thrashed until my boot came free, leaving me with one bare foot as I scrambled up the porch steps. The kitchen door slammed shut behind me, though I hadn't touched it. The note and the tooth were gone, replaced by a thin smear of that same black fluid, dragged across the table in a spiral. I didn't step closer. I couldn't. The sound of breathing filled the room. Not mine. It came from the walls, low and steady, like something large was sleeping just beyond the wood. Then faint at first, the knocking started. Not from outside. From under the floorboards. 3 slow knocks, a pause, 3 more. I wanted to tell myself it was pipes, some old settling noise, but the rhythm was too deliberate. My eyes darted to the corner of the room where a small square door sat flush with the floor, an old root cellar. The knocking was coming from there. I gripped the lantern and knelt beside the door. My hands trembled as I reached for the latch, telling myself over and over that I was only going to look, just look, so I could stop imagining things. The metal was icy under my fingers. I lifted the latch and pulled the door open. The lantern's glow spilled down into the cellar, catching on the edges of stone walls and wooden shelves. At first, I saw nothing. Then my light passed over something pale wedged into the farthest corner. A hand, not skeletal, not decayed. Fresh, the skin waxy and smooth, the nails blackened. It twitched once, fingers curling in slow invitation. That's when the smell hit me. Sweet, rotten cloying enough to make bile rise in my throat. The air from the cellar felt alive, thick with heat and the faint brush of movement, as though dozens of unseen bodies shifted in the dark. From the shadows behind the hand came her voice, low and rasping this time. "You opened it, now it's yours." The lantern flickered violently, and the darkness seemed to leap upward, swallowing the edges of the cellar, then the walls around me. The last thing I saw before the flame went out was the hand pulling itself forward, followed by another, and then another. The darkness swallowed me so completely that for a moment I thought I'd gone blind. I could still feel the floor beneath my knees, the wood trembling under something that moved below. But there was no light, only the scrape of fingernails against stone. Then something cold and wet wrapped around my wrist. The grip was strong enough to grind the bones together, and I bit down hard on my lip to keep from screaming. Whatever it was began to pull, slow and steady, drawing me toward the cellar opening. I clawed at the floor with my free hand, splinters driving under my nails. The thing below didn't rush. It didn't need to. It was patient, confident, as though it knew there was no escaping its grip. A face rose into view. Only it wasn't really a face, more a suggestion of one. The skin was pale and stretched too thin over its skull, the eyes cloudy and sunken, but the mouth was alive. The lips rippled, twitching in tiny spasms, and a black tongue slid out as if tasting the air between us. When it spoke, the sound wasn't coming from that mouth, it came from behind me, above me, inside me. They kept me here, for years, fed me pieces of themselves. The grip on my wrist tightened until I heard something crack. My stomach turned as I realized it wasn't just the bone. It was the skin splitting under the pressure. Warmth ran down my arm, and the thing's cloudy eyes sharpened, focusing on the blood. "They said it would keep her away," it murmured, but she was already inside. The words hit something deep in my chest, like they'd been meant for me all along. Before I could react, the other hands emerged from the darkness, dozens of them, pale and grasping, all reaching for me. I screamed then, raw and animal, and wrenched my arm free. Skin tore under its nails, but the pain only made me move faster. I slammed the cellar door shut and threw my weight onto it just as the first blow came from below, hard enough to lift me off the floor. The wood groaned, the latch rattling against its catch. The blows came again and again, shaking the room until they stopped all at once. Silence fell, heavy and complete. I didn't dare move. My heartbeat thudded in my ears and sweat stung the open cuts on my arm. Then the whispering started again. Not from the cellar this time, from upstairs. It was faint at first, like wind moving through empty rooms, but it grew clearer, voices overlapping, pleading, warning, cursing. I recognized one of them. I'd heard it in the woods the night before. "She's in the walls now," it said. My skin crawled. I grabbed the lantern and lit it with shaking hands, the flame guttering weakly. I needed to see, needed to know what was moving above me. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step stretching into an eternity. At the top, the hallway was darker than it should have been. as if the shadows themselves had thickened. I could barely see the wallpaper, but I could hear it. Faint tearing sounds like cloth being pulled apart. I stepped closer, holding the lantern out. That's when I saw the wall itself shifting, bulging outward in slow, pulsing waves. Something was moving inside, pressing against the plaster, stretching it thin. A handprint bloomed under the wallpaper, then another and another, until the entire wall seemed alive with them. They weren't all the same size. Some were small, the size of children. Others were impossibly large, fingers long enough to wrap around my head. From behind the wall came the sound of nails dragging downward, scoring deep lines into the wood beneath. Then from inside the plaster, her face pushed forward. It was distorted, stretched by the thin barrier between us, but the smile was unmistakable. Her lips moved against the wallpaper, and I could feel the vibrations in the air as the words came through. "You can't shut all the doors." The wall split, a long, jagged tear opening from ceiling to floor, and the blackness inside rushed out like breath from a lung. My lantern went out instantly, and the hallway was plunged into cold. Something moved in that dark, fast, too fast to follow, and a sharp pain tore through my shoulder. I stumbled back, hitting the opposite wall, but there was nowhere to run. She was everywhere now, in the floorboards, in the walls, in the air that burned my throat. In the brief flashes, my eyes adjusted. I saw her hands sliding out of the tier, nails black and hooked, dragging more of herself through. The sound was wet, like meat being pulled from bone. When her head finally emerged, the whispering stopped. Because now she didn't need to whisper. Her head slid free of the wall with a sickening pop, strands of plaster and damp wallpaper clinging to her hair. In the lantern's absence, I saw her by the faint gray light filtering through the warped window at the end of the hall. Her skin was wrong, no longer just pale, but thin and stretched so tight I could see the tendons shifting beneath. Her smile didn't fade. Then the rest began to come through. Her shoulders dislocated with a wet crack to fit through the tear, and when they reformed, they were sharper, jagged under the skin like broken glass. She wasn't alone. Something else followed, arms and legs that weren't hers, twisting and bending as they forced their way into the hallway. A face slid into view beside hers, mouth sewn shut with black thread, eyes rolling wildly. Another form emerged, hunched and jerking like a puppet yanked by tangled strings, its lips moving soundlessly. I realized, with a chill that rooted me to the floor, that these were the voices I'd been hearing. The others she had taken. They clung to her, half-merged, their skin melting into hers like wax. One of them, a man with no lower jaw, dragged himself halfway free and clawed toward me. His nails caught my pant leg, tearing the fabric before she yanked him back with a sound like meat ripping from bone. "They're mine," she said. Her voice was louder now, layered with all the others, the sound vibrating in my teeth. "You'll be mine too." I ran. I don't remember choosing a direction, only that the hallway seemed longer than it had before, stretching and twisting under my feet. The floorboards moved, warping like water, trying to trip me. The door at the end slammed shut just as I reached it. She was behind me. I could hear the wet slap of her bare feet on the wood, the dragging scrape of those hooked nails. The air around me thickened until it felt like I was running through tar. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and my vision swam. I veered into the first room I could, slamming the door and pressing my back against it. Something hit it instantly from the other side, not a full strike, but a slow, steady push. The wood bowed inward with each pressure, and the nails in the hinges squealed. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a rusted iron bed frame, and shoved it against the door. The pressure stopped. Silence. Then came a sound that made my stomach knot. Not the footsteps, not the whispers. A wet drip. Drip. Drip from above me. I looked up. On the ceiling right over my head, a dark spot spread slowly outward, soaking through the plaster. The drip hit my cheek, thick, warm, metallic. I wiped it away, and my fingers came back red. The ceiling groaned. A crack split down the center, and through it I saw a single black eye staring down at me. She didn't crash through, she poured. Her body folded in on itself, bones bending wrong, skin peeling open like wet paper, as she slid down in a torrent of limbs and faces and teeth. The bed frame toppled as I scrambled back into the corner, but there was nowhere to go. She hit the floor in a heap and then rose, pieces of the others still clinging to her, mouths opening in silent screams. "You smell like him," she said, leaning close enough for me to feel the heat of her breath. "Like the man who thought he could make me stop." Before I could speak, her hand shot out, nails hooking deep into my wounded arm. The pain was instant and blinding, and my knees gave out. She dragged me forward until my forehead touched hers, her skin cold enough to burn. Flashes burst in my mind. Not memories of mine, but of this place, the Bell farmhouse years ago. A man gasping for air while invisible hands gripped his throat. Children screaming as furniture flew at them. Blood pooling under a bed while a woman laughed from somewhere no one could see. Then I saw him, the man she meant, John Bell. His face twisted in agony, eyes bulging as she whispered into his ear the same words she'd just given me. "You smell like him." Tore away, the skin of my arm ripping under her claws. She laughed as I crashed through the side window, glass exploding around me. I hit the ground hard, my breath knocked out, but I didn't stop. I crawled through the dead grass, my vision swimming, until I reached the tree line. Behind me, the house sighed, wood settling, glass rattling. Then, from the open window above, her voice floated out, calm and certain. "You'll come back, they always do." I didn't stop running until the house was out of sight. But the woods weren't much of a refuge. The trees here grew close together, their branches gnarled and reaching, blocking out what little moonlight there was. The air smelled of wet soil and something else, an animal stink, heavy and rancid, like a predator had been rotting nearby. Every sound made me flinch. The crunch of leaves beneath my boots seemed too loud. My own breathing felt like it would give me away. Somewhere ahead, water trickled faintly, and I moved toward it, thinking if I could find the creek, I could follow it out of this cursed place. But the closer I got, the more I realized the trickle wasn't water. It was thicker, slower. When I pushed through the brush, I found the source, a shallow depression in the ground, filled with a dark liquid that gleamed in the dim light. The smell hit me immediately. Blood, but stale, turned sweet in the heat of the earth. Flies buzzed thick over the surface, landing and taking off in sluggish waves. The ground around the pool was disturbed, clawed up as though something had been dragged here. I could see deep grooves in the dirt, some the size of my own fingers, others much larger. And in the churned mud, half buried, was a human jawbone, teeth still in place. I stumbled back, my stomach lurching, and that's when I heard it. Her voice, but softer now, almost tender. "It's in the ground too," she made sure of that. The voice didn't come from behind me, or from the trees. It came from the pool itself, bubbling up with each word. As I stared, something pale broke the surface. A hand, slick and rotting, fingers spread wide. Another followed, then a head, the skin bloated and torn. It wasn't her. It was one of them. One of the others she had taken, buried deep in this soil like seeds. The thing pulled itself halfway out, eyes glassy, jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. Its fingernails were gone, worn down to raw flesh, and its mouth opened and closed soundlessly, the tongue swollen and gray. Then the pool erupted. Hands and arms, dozens of them pushing and clawing their way out, slick with black soil and blood. They weren't coming for me, not at first. They were pulling at each other, tearing chunks of flesh away, fighting for space. Their voices overlapped in broken whispers, begging me to help, begging me to leave, begging me to die with them. I backed away, but my heel caught on a root and I went down hard. That's when I saw her again. She was standing just beyond the reach of the hands, at the edge of the trees. Her body still stitched together with the pieces of the others. Her head tilted like she was listening to music only she could hear. "You feel it now, don't you?" she said. "The ground's full of them. The family tried to bury it, but they only fed me." She stepped forward, and the ground seemed to pulse under her feet. The hands reached toward her, not to grab, but to worship. Some pressed their palms into the dirt, as though bowing. My leg was still tangled in the root, and I kicked frantically until it came free. But as soon as I stood, the earth shifted under me. My foot sank ankle-deep into the soil, which clung and tightened like a fist. I pulled, but it was like trying to yank free from wet cement. She started walking toward me. With each step she took, the ground around me grew softer, the stink of rot intensifying. Something brushed against my trapped leg under the dirt, something cold and slick. Then another, curling around my calf like a snake. My panic spiked, and I reached down, clawing at the soil until my fingernails bent back. Her smile widened. "You'll feed the ground, and then you'll feed me." I wrenched my leg free with a scream, skin scraping raw in the process, and stumbled backward into the trees. I didn't care where I went, just away from her, away from that pool of writhing limbs. But the woods had changed. The trees were closer now, their trunks twisted, roots writhing just under the leaf litter like something alive. The whispering followed me no matter how fast I ran, threading through the branches. Some voices angry, others pleading. I don't know how long I ran before I saw the light. It flickered faintly between the trees, warm and golden, nothing like the cold gray of the moon. I pushed toward it, branches clawing at my arms until I broke into a clearing. There, half buried in the soil, was a lantern, old, rusted, its glass cracked. But it was lit. The flame danced without wind, steady and strong. Something was written in the dirt at its base, traced in long, deliberate letters. "Go back the instant I read it, the light died." And in the dark behind me she whispered, "Yes, go back." I turned to run, but the forest seemed to fold in on itself. The trees leaned closer, their branches knitting together overhead, blocking out even the faint glow of the moon. Roots shifted under my boots, twisting to trip me. No matter which way I turned, every path led back toward where I'd come from, toward the house. I don't remember deciding to walk there. It was like my legs were moving without me. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow, as if the air was too thin. When the warped silhouette of the Bell farmhouse emerged between the trees, my stomach turned over. The front door was open. It shouldn't have been. I'd left through the window, I was sure of it. The moment I stepped over the threshold, the air inside hit me like a wall, hot, damp, carrying that same sweet rot that clung to her breath. The door slammed shut behind me, and I didn't even turn to look. The house was different now. The walls pulsed faintly, like there was a heartbeat buried somewhere deep inside the wood. The wallpaper peeled and bubbled, leaking dark fluid in slow rivulets down to the floor. The boards under my feet were warm, and I could feel something shifting beneath them, like the ground itself was breathing. Then I heard her voice, not ahead of me but inside my skull. "You smell like him, let me show you why." The hallway stretched out before me, impossibly long, lined with doors that hadn't been there before. They opened one by one as I walked, and inside each room I saw them, the Bell family. But not as they'd been in the history books. In one room a boy sat in the corner, rocking, his fingernails worn down to stumps as he scraped them against the wall. In another, a woman crouched in the dark, clutching her own hair so tightly her scalp had split. Further on, a man lay flat on the floor, his lips blue, his hands clawing weakly at his own throat as if trying to pry away invisible fingers. I didn't want to look, but my head turned toward each of them like a puppet pulled by strings. Their eyes followed me, wide and wet with terror, their mouths moving silently. Then, at the end of the hallway, I saw her. She wasn't merged with the others now. She stood alone, tall and impossibly thin, her dress clinging to her like wet skin. Her arms hung too long, fingers dragging against the floorboards. Between us lay a long, low table. On it were the remains of a meal, meat charred black, bones split open to suck the marrow, teeth scattered among the scraps. I knew without asking whose bones they were. "Sit," she said, and the word didn't come as a command, it came like a fact, as if it had already happened. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the bench across from her. She reached across the table, her nails hooking into my wounded arm again. But this time, she didn't pull me closer. She pushed something into my hand. I looked down and saw a piece of bone, smooth from long handling. "This was his," she said. "John Bell. He thought he could bury me in the ground, but the ground belongs to me now." Her smile widened until it split the skin at the corners of her mouth. Blood welled and ran down her chin, but she didn't stop. "I'll live in you the way I lived in him. You'll speak for me, you'll feed me. And when you're gone, I'll find another." Before I could move, she lunged, her mouth closed over my face, impossibly wide, her teeth scraping my cheekbones. Heat and rot and something colder than ice filled my head as she breathed me in. My vision went white. my body convulsing as if my veins had been filled with boiling water. I saw everything she had done, every throat she had closed, every child she had dragged from their bed, every last scream she had swallowed. And underneath it all, I felt her hunger. When she let go, I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, my skin slick with sweat. She stood over me, her shadow stretching across the room like a living thing. "You're mine now," she whispered. "Go ahead, leave, see how far you get." I did leave. I don't remember the walk to my car or the drive out of that hollow, but even now I hear her voice every time I close my eyes. Sometimes I wake up with dirt under my nails. Sometimes there's a tooth on my pillow. And sometimes when I breathe in, I can still smell that sweet, rotting air. Like she's inside me, waiting for the right moment to step out. Thank you for listening. I kindly ask you to drop a like and subscribe and share this video with fellow horror story fan.